I never thought I'd be standing on my own daughter's porch like a complete stranger. My hands were trembling as I pressed that doorbell, not from the cold, but from pure desperation. Everything, and I mean everything, had collapsed in 48 hours. 48 hours. That's all it took for my entire life to turn into ashes. 3 weeks before that moment, I'd been a man with everything figured out. I owned a successful consulting business. Nothing flashy, nothing that made headlines, but solid, real. 23 years of grinding, building something from absolutely nothing. I had a partner, not just a business partner, but someone I'd trusted with my life. Michael. We'd met in our early 30s, built this empire together, became brothers, or at least I thought we did. My daughter Jessica had always been skeptical about Michael. She'd pull me aside at family dinners, her voice careful but firm. "Dad, something about him feels wrong. I can't explain it, but I feel it." I'd laugh it off. I'd tell her she was being overprotective, that Michael was one of the good ones. I was so blind, so incredibly, stupidly blind. The morning everything shifted started like any other Wednesday. I walked into the office expecting another routine day. The files were gone. Not missing, not misplaced. Gone. Every single account, every contract, every document that proved our company existed had been systematically erased from the servers. Michael's office was empty, his desk completely cleaned out, his computer wiped clean. I called him 19 times. 19. Each call went straight to voicemail, a voicemail that didn't even play his greeting anymore. Just the cold, generic system voice. That's when I felt it. That moment when your stomach drops and you realize you've been played. Not just played, completely and utterly destroyed. The lawyers arrived the next morning, then the accountants, then everything spiraled into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Michael hadn't just taken the files, he'd taken the money, all of it. $12 million moved through shell accounts he'd created years ago. Accounts I didn't even know existed. My signature was on documents I'd never seen, papers I'd never signed, perfect forgeries. Absolutely perfect. But here's the thing about being betrayed that completely. The system doesn't care about your innocence. The police didn't care that I'd been devastated by this man. To them, I looked like a partner in fraud. My assets were frozen before I could even call my lawyer. Every penny I'd built over 2 decades, frozen solid. My bank accounts, my property, everything. I went home that night and sat in the complete darkness of my living room. I didn't turn on a single light. I just sat there in the black, understanding for the first time what absolute nothing feels like. I wasn't just broke. I was accused. I was a suspect. I was the guy who'd been stupid enough to trust the completely wrong person, the guy who'd ignored every warning. I thought about calling Jessica. She'd been right all along. My own daughter, the one person in my life who'd seen through Michael when I couldn't, had warned me, and I'd dismissed her. I'd made her feel like she was being unfair, like she was judging someone without any cause. The guilt of that realization hit me harder than the money loss ever could. It took me 4 days to work up the courage to drive to her house. 4 days of rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd explain that her father, the man who'd always told her to trust her instincts, had completely ignored her instincts. 4 days of knowing that I deserved whatever harsh response I was about to receive. The drive to her neighborhood felt like it took forever. Her house was in the suburbs, a place I'd only visited 3 times in 2 years. She'd made a life there, completely away from me and my world of business deals and endless office hours. I'd missed that. I'd missed so much. Now I was about to lose even more if she refused to let me through that door. I parked the car on the street, and my hands immediately gripped the steering wheel. I sat there, trying to gather whatever dignity I had left. I was 54 years old, sitting outside my daughter's house, about to beg for help like I was a broken kid. Except this wasn't a scraped knee or a failed test. This was my entire existence crumbling. I walked to her front door slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last, like I was walking through concrete. I could hear music from inside, something soft, instrumental playing quietly. She was home. Of course she was home. Jessica always had routines. She'd always been predictable, reliable, everything Michael had pretended to be. My finger hovered over the doorbell for what felt like an eternity. This was it. The moment where I'd have to admit I'd been catastrophically wrong. Not just wrong about business or judgment, but wrong about who I could trust. Wrong about ignoring my own daughter's warnings. I pressed the button. The music inside stopped immediately. I heard footsteps approaching, quick, confident footsteps. The door opened slowly, and there she was. Jessica, my daughter. She looked tired, like she'd been working on something. She had flour on her sleeve. She'd been baking. That was so Jessica. Her eyes went wide the moment she saw me standing there, not in a happy way, in a shocked way. In a way that told me she immediately understood that something was catastrophically wrong with her father. "Dad?" she said, her voice uncertain and confused. "What are you doing here? It's Wednesday night." I opened my mouth to speak, but the words got stuck somewhere in my throat. How do you explain to your child that you've lost absolutely everything? How do you tell her that the man you trusted more than anyone had stolen not just money, but your reputation, your future, your dignity, your peace of mind? Before I could find any words at all, her expression shifted dramatically. Something flickered across her face. Recognition maybe, or terrible understanding. She looked at my clothes, disheveled and worn. She looked at my face, clearly exhausted and broken. She looked at my eyes, filled with pure desperation and shame. And then she said it, the words that cut deeper than any of Michael's betrayals ever could, words that I'd been dreading and expecting all at once. "You really have the nerve to show up here?" Her voice wasn't angry. That's what made it so much worse. It wasn't angry or hostile. It was disappointed. It was the voice of a daughter who'd been proven completely right and who now had to watch her father face the exact consequences of ignoring her warnings. It was the voice of someone who'd tried desperately to warn him and had been dismissed and made to feel foolish for it. I felt my throat tighten painfully. "Jessica, Come inside," she said quietly, stepping back from the doorway. "But we're going to talk about a lot of things. Everything." I stepped into her house, leaving the evening darkness behind me. I didn't know it yet, but standing in that doorway was the last moment of my old life. Everything that came after would be about rebuilding from absolute zero, about learning to actually listen, about understanding that sometimes the people closest to us see things we're too proud or too blind to acknowledge. My daughter closed the door behind me, and for the first time since everything had fallen apart, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't have to face this nightmare completely alone. Jessica's living room was exactly what I remembered. Clean, organized, filled with soft lighting and the kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. She gestured toward the couch, and I sat down carefully, like the furniture might disappear if I moved too suddenly. Everything felt fragile. I felt fragile. "Coffee?" she asked, standing there with her arms crossed. Not warm, not cold, just neutral, professional almost. "Yeah. Thank you," I said quietly. She disappeared into the kitchen, and I sat there alone, looking around at this space my daughter had created. There were pictures on the walls, some of her friends, some of landscapes she'd taken herself. No pictures of me. I noticed that immediately. There used to be a photo of us from years ago at her college graduation. Gone now. She came back with 2 mugs and sat across from me in an armchair, not on the couch next to me. The distance between us felt symbolic. She took a sip of her coffee and just looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "I'm going to ask you something, and I want the complete truth," Jessica said, her voice steady. "What happened? And don't give me any business jargon. Give me the real story." So I told her. I told her everything about Michael and the partnership, about how I'd trusted him completely, about the shell accounts and the forged documents, about the frozen assets and the police investigation, about how I'd lost everything in 2 days. Jessica listened without interrupting. She just sat there, holding her coffee, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she leaned forward. "Dad, do you remember what I told you at dinner 6 months ago?" she asked. I remembered. She'd said Michael made her uncomfortable. She'd said she didn't trust him. I'd brushed her off, told her she was being paranoid. "I remember," I admitted. "I wasn't being paranoid," Jessica said, and there was pain in her voice. Real pain. "I saw something in him, something off, and you made me feel like I was crazy for feeling it. You made me question myself. Do you understand what that does to someone, when your own father dismisses your instincts?" I felt shame wash over me, deep, burning shame. "Jessica, I'm so sorry. I was arrogant. I thought I knew better." "You did think you knew better," she interrupted, not unkindly. "You thought you were the expert, the successful businessman who had everything figured out. And you ignored the one person in your life who was trying to protect you because her instincts were telling her the truth." "I know," I whispered. "I know that now." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark street. "When you called me today, I almost didn't answer." "Did you know that? I saw your name on my phone and I almost let it go to voicemail." That hit me like a punch. My own daughter almost didn't answer my call. "But I did answer," she continued, turning back to face me. "Because despite everything, you're still my father, and I could hear in your voice that something was very wrong." "Jessica," I started, but she held up her hand. "Let me finish," she said. "I'm going to help you. Not because you deserve it right now, not because you've earned it, but because I love you, and I believe you when you say you didn't know what Michael was doing. I believe you because I know you, but this is going to be on my terms. Do you understand?" I nodded, unable to speak. "First, you're going to move in here for a while," she said firmly. "You don't have anywhere else to go, and I'm not going to have my father on the streets. Second, you're going to work with the lawyers. You're going to fight this. You're going to prove you're innocent. Third, and this is the most important part, you're going to listen to people. You're going to stop thinking you know everything. You're going to actually hear what people are telling you." "Okay," I said. "Okay, I can do that." "And fourth," she added, her voice softer now, "you're going to understand that what Michael did wasn't your fault. But how you responded to my warnings, that was on you, and you need to own that." I nodded, tears finally breaking through. I didn't try to stop them. Jessica sat back down on the couch, closer this time, not hugging me, but closer. "We're going to get through this," she said. "But it's going to take time, it's going to take work, and you're going to have to learn to trust people again, including me." Over the next few weeks, Jessica helped me contact lawyers. We built a case against Michael. The police investigation eventually cleared me, but not before my reputation had taken a serious hit. Some of my old clients had already moved on. Some thought I was guilty. The business I'd built for 23 years was effectively over, but I was rebuilding something else, something more important, my relationship with my daughter. Jessica taught me how to listen again, how to sit with uncomfortable truths, how to admit when I was wrong. We'd sit in her living room at night, sometimes talking, sometimes just existing in the quiet together. I learned about her life, about her job as a graphic designer, about the friends she'd made, about her dreams and her struggles. I'd missed so much. So many years of missing so much because I was too focused on building an empire that could crumble in 2 days. One evening, about 3 months after I'd shown up at her door, we were making dinner together. I was chopping vegetables, and Jessica was at the stove, and she turned to me and said something that changed everything. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said simply, "for admitting you were wrong, for listening, for showing up. A lot of men wouldn't have had the courage to do what you did. I stopped chopping. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and I realized that I'd been given something I didn't deserve. A second chance, not with my business, not with my money, but with the person who mattered most. "I'm proud of you too," I said, and I meant it with every part of my being. "I always have been. I just didn't tell you enough." She smiled, and for the first time since Michael had destroyed my world, I felt something like hope. Not the desperate, grasping kind of hope. Real hope. The kind that comes from knowing that even when everything falls apart, you can still rebuild what truly matters. I'd lost everything, my business, my reputation, my savings, my sense of security. But standing in my daughter's kitchen, chopping vegetables, and listening to her laugh about something funny that happened at work, I realized I'd actually found something far more valuable than any of it. I'd found my daughter again, and this time, I was going to listen. 6 months into living with Jessica, I'd started to feel like a human being again. Not fully. I don't know if I'll ever feel completely whole after what happened, but there was a difference between surviving and actually living. I was beginning to learn the distinction. The legal battle with Michael was brutal and slow. My lawyers had traced the stolen money through multiple accounts across different countries. Some of it they recovered. Not all of it, but enough to prove I wasn't complicit. The police investigation eventually concluded that I was a victim of fraud, not a perpetrator. The charges were dropped. My name was cleared, officially. But clearing your name and clearing your reputation are two completely different things. Some of my old colleagues didn't return my calls. Some did, but their tone had changed. There was suspicion there now, a hesitation that hadn't existed before. People I'd worked with for 2 decades suddenly seemed uncomfortable around me. It wasn't their fault. Michael had been brilliant at his deception, and a lot of people were left wondering if they'd been fooled too. Jessica never said, "I told you so," but she didn't need to. The truth was written all over what had happened. She'd seen through Michael when I couldn't. She'd tried to warn me, and I'd dismissed her. What amazed me most during those months was how she never made me feel small for it. She could have. She had every right to. Instead, she challenged me to grow. "You keep waiting for people to forgive you," she said one evening as we sat on her porch watching the sunset. "But you haven't forgiven yourself yet? That's the real problem." She was right. I was carrying this enormous weight of shame and regret. Every mistake I'd made felt magnified under a microscope. Every time I'd ignored her warnings, every moment I'd been arrogant or dismissive, it all came rushing back. "How do I do that?" I asked. "How do I forgive myself for being so blind?" "You start by understanding why you were blind," Jessica said thoughtfully. "It wasn't stupidity, Dad. It was loneliness. You built this huge business empire, but you were alone inside it. Michael filled a void. He made you feel less alone. And when someone does that, it's hard to see their flaws clearly." I hadn't thought about it that way before, but she was right. After my divorce from her mother, which had happened 15 years ago, I'd thrown myself into work. I'd built walls around myself. Michael had been the first real friend I'd let in during all those years, and I'd been so grateful for that connection that I'd overlooked everything else. "I've wasted so much time," I said quietly. "No," Jessica corrected me. "You're wasting time right now by thinking about it that way. You can't change the past, but you can change what you do with what's left." In my 2nd month living with her, I started volunteering at a local community center. Nothing fancy, just helping people with basic computer skills and small business consulting. I wasn't charging anything. I was just giving back, trying to use the knowledge I'd accumulated to help people who didn't have resources. It was humbling work. I met people who'd been through their own kinds of betrayal, their own financial disasters, their own moments of losing everything. And somehow, my story, the version of it that included my blindness and my mistakes, seemed to help them. It made them feel less alone. One day, a woman named Maria came to one of my sessions. She was trying to start a small business, and she was terrified of making the wrong choice about who to trust with her money. We spent 3 hours going through her business plan, looking at potential partners, evaluating their backgrounds. "How do you know who to trust?" she asked me at the end. "I mean, really know?" I thought about that question carefully. "You don't," I admitted. "Not completely, but you can listen to the people who love you. You can pay attention to warning signs, and you can remember that if something feels off, it probably is. Your instincts are usually smarter than your brain." She smiled sadly. "I wish I'd known that before I gave my brother-in-law $50,000. He disappeared with it last year." "Then you know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, "and you won't make that mistake again." After that session, I realized that my pain could serve a purpose. My failure could be a teacher. The betrayal I'd experienced wasn't just something that happened to me. It was something I could use to help others avoid the same trap. Jessica noticed the change in me. One evening, she asked me to sit down. We were in her living room, and she had this serious expression on her face that made me nervous. "I've been thinking about something," she said, "and I want to talk to you about it." "Okay," I said cautiously, "what is it?" "I want you to know that I'm proud of you," she said, "not because you've recovered financially or because you've cleared your name legally. I'm proud of you because you've actually changed. You listen now, you admit when you're wrong, you're humble in a way I've never seen you before." I felt tears threatening, but I held them back. "I had a good teacher," I said. "You did," she agreed, smiling slightly. "But more importantly, you actually learned. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how many people go through something like this and just become bitter?" "I know," I said. "I could have gone that way." "You could have," Jessica agreed. "But you didn't. You chose to grow instead. And that matters. That matters more than the money or the business or any of it." Toward the end of my 6th month living with her, I had what I can only describe as a breakthrough. I was sitting at her dining table, looking through some old boxes of personal items I'd salvaged from my house before it went into foreclosure. There were photographs from the early days of my business, pictures of Michael and me at company events, smiling like brothers. I looked at those pictures and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not anger, not shame, understanding. I understood finally that I hadn't been stupid. I'd been human. I'd made a choice based on the information I had and the emotional state I was in. It wasn't a good choice. It wasn't a wise choice, but it was a human choice, and I could forgive myself for that. "Dad," Jessica appeared in the doorway. "You okay?" I looked up at her. "I think I am," I said, and I meant it. "I think I finally am." She came and sat next to me, and we went through the old photographs together. She asked me about the early days of the business, about the struggles and the victories. I told her stories she'd never heard before, stories about how I'd almost given up, about how Michael had encouraged me to keep going back when he'd actually been my friend before he'd become someone else entirely. "People are complicated," I said, more to myself than to her. Michael was real at some point. The friendship was real. And then something changed in him, or something was always there that I didn't see. Either way, that doesn't negate what was good between us. It just means that good things can be destroyed by lies. Jessica listened, and when I finished, she said something that would stay with me forever. "That's wisdom, Dad. Real wisdom. That you can hold both truths at the same time, that Michael was your friend and that he betrayed you, that you were foolish and that you were human. That's growth." As we put the photographs away, I made a decision. I was going to stop living in the past. I was going to stop dwelling on what I'd lost. Instead, I was going to focus on what I was building, a real relationship with my daughter, a life of purpose through helping others, and a version of myself that was stronger because it had been broken and had chosen to rebuild. The business was gone. The money was gone. But I was here, and I was finally, truly present. 7 months after showing up at Jessica's door like a broken man, I received a phone call that changed everything again. This time, it was from my lawyer. Michael had been arrested in Costa Rica, trying to move money through another account. The authorities had connected him to a string of similar frauds going back years. He wasn't just a thief. He was a serial con artist, and they were building a case that would put him away for a very long time. The news hit me differently than I expected. I didn't feel vindicated or excited about revenge. Instead, I felt a strange kind of sadness. Michael had wasted his intelligence, his charm, his abilities on destruction. He could have built something real with me. Instead, he'd chosen to destroy everything for money that would eventually be taken away anyway. Jessica was at work when I got the call, so I sat with the news alone for a while. I thought about everything that had happened, about the chain of events that had led me to standing on my daughter's porch, begging for help. I thought about how close I'd come to losing her completely, how I'd almost destroyed the most important relationship in my life through my own arrogance and blindness. When Jessica came home that evening, I told her about Michael's arrest. She listened, and then she hugged me, not for Michael's downfall, but because she understood what it meant for me to finally have closure. "What happens now?" she asked. "With the legal stuff?" "They're going to recover more money," I said. "Not everything, but enough that I could actually rebuild if I wanted to." "Do you?" she asked. "Want to rebuild the business, I mean?" I thought about it carefully. The old me would have said yes immediately. The old me would have already been planning my comeback, thinking about how to get back to the top. But I wasn't that man anymore. "No," I said finally. "I don't think I do. That life, it wasn't making me happy. It was just making me busy." Jessica smiled. "So what will you do?" "I've been thinking about that," I said. "The volunteer work at the community center. I've been talking to the director about expanding the program. They want to help more people learn business skills, financial literacy, how to spot fraud and manipulation. I was thinking, maybe I could do that full time, for a salary that's honest and modest, but enough to live on." "That's beautiful, Dad," Jessica said, and she meant it. Over the next month, as the financial pieces slowly started to come together, I made some decisions. I used a portion of the recovered money to pay Jessica back for letting me stay with her, even though she tried to refuse. I set aside enough to live modestly and to help Maria and some of the other people I'd met through volunteering with their business ventures. I donated a significant amount to a fraud awareness organization, and I kept just enough to know I wouldn't be completely destitute. The rest I let go. The need to accumulate, to prove something, to be the biggest or the best, all of that had lost its grip on me. In my 8th month with Jessica, I was offered the full-time position at the community center. It came with benefits, a modest salary, and the opportunity to design the curriculum for fraud awareness and business literacy programs. I accepted immediately. On my first official day, I stood in front of a classroom of 30 people from all walks of life, and I told them my story. Not the sanitized version, the real version, the version where I was blind and foolish and arrogant, the version where I ignored my daughter's warnings, the version where I lost everything because I thought I knew better. And I watched something shift in their faces. Relief, mostly. Relief that someone who'd been successful, who'd built something real, could also fail. Relief that failure wasn't a permanent condition, that you could come back from it, that you could be humbled and emerge better. After the class, a young man named David came up to me. He looked nervous, like he had something he needed to say but wasn't sure how. "I almost got involved with someone," he said quietly, "for an investment. Something about him didn't sit right, but I couldn't explain it. When you were talking about ignoring your daughter's instincts, I realized that's what I was about to do. I was about to ignore my own gut feeling because the opportunity seemed too good to pass up." "Did you?" I asked. "Ignore it?" "No," David said. "I called it off. I'm going to do more research, and I'm going to listen to that feeling in my stomach, because if someone like you, someone who actually succeeded, can get taken for $12 million by ignoring warning signs, then I need to be even more careful." I put my hand on his shoulder. "That's exactly right," I said. "Trust that feeling. It's there for a reason." As I watched David leave the classroom, I thought about how my pain was being transformed into purpose. Every person in that room had come because they wanted to protect themselves from fraud, from manipulation, from the kind of betrayal I'd experienced, and I could help them. Not because I was special, but because I'd failed so spectacularly and lived to tell about it. That evening I called my ex-wife Linda for the first time in years. We'd been divorced for a long time, and our relationship had been cordial but distant. I wanted her to know what was happening, not because I needed her approval, but because I wanted her to know I was finally becoming the kind of man I should have been all along. "I heard about what happened," she said when she answered. "I'm sorry about Michael." "Don't be," I said. "It was the best thing that could have happened to me, even though it didn't feel that way at the time." We talked for an hour. She told me about her life, about how she'd rebuilt after our divorce, about the decisions she'd made to find happiness. And I listened, really listened. For the first time in years, I didn't interrupt. I didn't try to fix anything. I just heard her. Before we hung up, she said something that meant more to me than she probably realized. "I'm glad you're doing better," she said, "and I'm proud of you for building a real relationship with Jessica. She needed her father to show up for her like this." "Better late than never?" I asked, trying to make a joke but feeling the weight of lost time. "Better late than never," she agreed. A year after I'd shown up at Jessica's door, like a man with nothing, I was offered a position teaching financial literacy at a local community college. It came with a slight increase in salary and the opportunity to reach even more people. I accepted it. My consulting work had evolved from a side project to a calling. But the most important moment came on a quiet Sunday morning. Jessica and I were having coffee on her porch, something we'd made a ritual of doing every weekend. The sun was rising over the neighborhood, and everything felt peaceful in a way I couldn't have imagined when I'd been sitting in my car outside her house, terrified to ring the doorbell. "I want to tell you something," Jessica said, setting down her coffee cup. "Something I've been thinking about for a while." "Okay," I said, waiting. "I've been offered a promotion at work," she said. "It would mean more money, more responsibility, more hours. And a year ago I would have turned it down because I was so focused on taking care of you. But now you don't have to," I asked gently. "Now I don't have to," she confirmed. "But more than that, now I want to. Because I know you're going to be okay. More than okay. You're going to be great." I felt tears in my eyes. "Take it," I said immediately. "Take the promotion. Build your life. You deserve that." "We both deserve that," Jessica said. "And I think we're both finally getting it." Over the next few months, everything continued to shift. Jessica took the promotion and thrived in her new role. I expanded my teaching to 3 different community organizations. The legal battle with Michael was finally resolved, and I received the last of the recovered funds. I didn't accumulate it. Instead, I created a small scholarship fund for people who'd experienced fraud and were trying to rebuild their lives. And one day, about 14 months after I'd shown up at Jessica's door like a broken man, I realized something profound. I wasn't defined by what I'd lost anymore. I wasn't the guy whose business was destroyed by his partner. I wasn't the man who'd ignored his daughter's warnings. I was someone who'd been broken and had chosen to rebuild in a completely different way. I was a teacher. I was a father who finally understood his daughter. I was a person who'd learned that success wasn't measured in dollars or business empires, but in the quality of your relationships and the impact you had on other people's lives. Michael had taken my money, my reputation, my sense of security. But he'd given me something invaluable in return, though he'd never intended to. He'd given me the opportunity to become the man I should have been all along. On a summer evening, Jessica and I attended a community event where I was being honored for my work with fraud awareness. There was a plaque, a small ceremony, a few kind words from people I'd helped. It was nothing compared to the business accolades I'd received years before, but it meant infinitely more. As I stood at the podium holding that plaque, I looked out at the audience and saw Jessica sitting in the front row, beaming with pride. I saw David, the young man who'd almost fallen for the investment scam, now helping to teach the class. I saw Maria, who'd successfully launched her small business and was mentoring other entrepreneurs. I saw dozens of faces of people whose lives had been touched by the work I was doing. And I thought about Michael, probably sitting in a prison cell somewhere with all his money gone and all his freedom stripped away. And I felt something I'd never expected to feel. Gratitude. Gratitude that my loss had led me here. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, I said into the microphone, my voice steady and clear. I want to tell you that 1.5 years ago, I was a broken man. I'd lost everything I thought was important, my business, my money, my reputation, my sense of self-worth. I came very close to losing the most important thing, my relationship with my daughter. I paused, looking directly at Jessica. But sometimes, when you lose everything, you have the opportunity to rebuild everything, and if you're lucky, you rebuild it better. I'm here tonight because I made a choice. I chose to learn from my failure instead of being destroyed by it. I chose to listen instead of pretending to know everything. I chose to be humble instead of arrogant. And most importantly, I chose to be present for the people who loved me, even when I didn't deserve that love. The room was silent, and I could see tears in many eyes. If you're here because you've experienced fraud, because you've been betrayed, because you've lost something important, I want you to know that this isn't the end of your story. This is the beginning of a different story, a story where you get to decide who you become and what matters most. As I stepped down from the podium, Jessica stood up and hugged me, and in that moment I understood completely what it meant to truly have everything. Not because I was rich, but because I was loved. Not because I was successful by the world's standards, but because I was finally, genuinely, a good man. The past couldn't be changed. Michael's betrayal couldn't be undone. The years I'd missed with Jessica couldn't be recovered. But the future was mine to build. And I was going to build it with intention, with humility, and with the knowledge that the most important things in life can't be stolen or frozen or destroyed by anyone but yourself. I'd shown up at my daughter's door as a man who'd lost everything. I was leaving as a man who'd finally found what truly mattered, and that made all the difference.